Okay guys, we're going to go ahead and start 10.6. Let's do the warm-up first, so put me on pause and go ahead and try it by yourself first. Go ahead. What is the solution of the system of equations? System meaning that there are two equations here of c plus 3d equals 8 and c is equal to 4d minus 6. Don't be confused. They're using c and d versus x and y. If you remember back to systems of equations, you guys learned how to do this three ways. You did it graphically, where you got them both into y equals mx plus b. You got did it algebraically, which was either by substitution or elimination. So we need to practice those. It's been a while. Let's go ahead and do, I'm looking at this, and the way they have it set up for us, they've already solved it for c. So I think we should do substitution and substitute the 4d minus 6 in for where the c is. So if I do that, instead of writing c, I'm going to put 4d minus 6, drop down my plus 3d is equal to 8. So notice here, 4d minus 6 was substituted in for my c. When you do that, it now turns the equation into where there's only one unknown variable rather than two. Combine your like terms. 4d plus 3d is 7d. Minus 6 equals 8. Add 6 to both sides, and you get 7d is equal to 14. Divide by 2, or excuse me, by 7. Jump into the answer here, and d is equal to 2. Now you have to go ahead and find, we found d, we now have to find c. So let's use this equation, since it's already solved for c. You can use either one. I'm going to use this one over here. So it's 4 times d, which we came out as 2, minus 6. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 minus 6 is equal to 2. So c equals 2. I'm not going to do the checks on this, but you're going to, usually you have to do 2 checks because there are 2 equations. 1, 2. Make sure you check both of them into both equations and see if you're correct. Okay? That's solving a system of equations algebraically by the method of substitution. Alright, 10.6, trigonometric ratios. This is honors level. Regular crew does not do this for a little bit longer. This is totally, I think this is totally new for you, but you're going to need a scientific calculator at the minimum. You need to have sine, cosine, which it says cos, and tangent, tan, on your calculator in order to do some of these problems. The sine of angle A, written sine A, excuse me, and cosine of angle A is cos A, and tangent of A is tangent of A. The sine of A is equal to the length of the leg, opposite of A, over the length of the hypotenuse. Cos is, so this one is opposite over hypotenuse. The cosine is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. Remember, the hypotenuse is always opposite the 90-degree angle, and the hypotenuse, the opposite and the adjacent could be either one of these sides depending on what angle we're talking about. In this case, we're talking about angle A. So the one that is next to it, that's touching it, is adjacent to it. The other one that's touching it is already taken by the hypotenuse. So if this one is adjacent, then the one across from it would be the opposite. Okay? The opposite and adjacent will change if I talk about this angle down here. You guys need to remember this. One of the ways we remember it is called SOHCAHTOA, and write it like this. So SOHCAHTOA. Notice I made the S, the C, and the T big. I do that on purpose because the sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, O over H. Cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, A over H. And tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent, SOHCAHTOA. So this actually is a nice way to remember those three trig functions. Another one that I had somebody told me way back in the day is Oscar had a heap of apples, which a lot of kids will remember that, but the problem with Oscar had a heap of apples is it doesn't take into the S, the C, and the T into the little saying. So that didn't work as well for me. All right, so let's look at this. This is a little bit confusing, so be focused here. What are the sine E, cosine E, and tangent E? So they want the sine, cosine, and tangent of all of the angles E. So I'm going to, on my diagram and on your diagram, make sure you stick this guy out because this is the angle we're talking about. Okay, so let's look at first sine of angle E. Before I actually start doing this, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to label which side is the opposite, which side is the hypotenuse, and which side is the opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. Well, first I'm going to identify the hypotenuse. I go to my 90 degrees and I go across from it, and I know that this guy is the hypotenuse, so I'll put H. Now, if I'm looking at E, which I am, the side that is attached to it, it can't be this one because this has already been used, it has to be this one, has to be the adjacent. So if this one's the adjacent, the other side that's opposite it is the opposite O. Okay, so if you label it O, H, and A every time you get this, it might actually help you if it's confusing. So sine, don't forget, so ka, toa. Whoops, I messed that up. So katoa. Okay, there we go. So sine of E, so go to this, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So go down to E. The opposite is the 9, and the hypotenuse is the 15. That can be simplified. They're both divisible by 3, so that's 3/5. Cosine of E is adjacent over hypotenuse. So go back to my diagram, go to E, adjacent is the 12, over the hypotenuse is the 15. They're both divisible by 3, so it's 4/5. Cosine, oops, not cosine, just did that one, tangent of E. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite is 9, adjacent is 12. These are both divisible by 3, so we get 3/4. So those are the ratio or the fraction measures of sine, cosine, and tangent of angle E. In this one, it says write as a decimal to the nearest 10,000th. You guys are going to need your calculators now. It says what's the value of cosine of 55? We can't do this without a table or a calculator at this point. So cosine of 55. So grab your scientific calculator or graphing calculator if you have one. When you turn your calculator on, make sure it's in degrees. So on the top screen, it either has a little d or a DEG. You don't want it in radians. So go ahead and press in cosine of 55, and typically they want you to round to the nearest 10,000ths, which is the 4th place value. So it's 0.573, and then the 5 is going to go up to this guy's going to round up to a 6 because of the 7 that follows the 5. Okay, so that should be easy because you've got your calculator. Finding the side to the nearest 10th. So here in this case they're asking us to round to the nearest 10th. They gave us this angle, which is 48 degrees. They want us to figure out what x is, which is right here. They gave us the hypotenuse, because that's the side opposite the 90-degree angle. Now, some kids think that they can use the Pythagorean theorem, which you guys learned back in the beginning of this chapter. Now remember, Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I need this, I have this, but I'm missing the side. So because I need a side, I would need the other two sides in order to use the Pythagorean theorem. I don't have this side, so I cannot use the Pythagorean theorem, which forces me to use trigonometry, which is sine, cosine, and tangent. So we're going to use the angle they gave us. I'm going to identify it. This guy is the hypotenuse. The side opposite is the opposite, and this guy is the adjacent, which really I don't need because I'm not looking for it and they didn't give it to me. So which trig function? Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. So if you look at this, because I'm given the hypotenuse and I'm looking for the opposite, I have to have O and H, which would be, O and H would be this guy right here. So that means I have to use sine of what angle did they give me? 48 degrees is equal to the opposite, which was x. Remember, opposite over hypotenuse. So it's x over 14. Now, take your calculator because you've got to figure out what the sine of 48 is. So put in sine of 48, round it off to the fourth place value for now. 0.7431 is equal to x over 14. You can turn it into a proportion, or the inverse of dividing would be to multiply. Do it to both sides. So take that answer and multiply it by 14. You're going to end up with x equals, and we're going to round it because they want to the nearest tenth, 10.4. So that's this missing side right there. Alright, we got two more screens, and hopefully I won't run out of time. Let's at least get through this one. In a right triangle, let's draw a picture, make it a right triangle. The opposite side, A, is 8, so let's go A. The hypotenuse is 12, so that's going to be this, B and C. So the opposite side, A, is 8, and the hypotenuse is 12. What is the measure of angle A? They want this angle right here. So you know what? We'll call it x. So notice they want an angle. So let's see. They gave us the hypotenuse. They gave us the opposite. Which trig function uses opposite and hypotenuse? Is it sine? Yes. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So you're going to do sine of what angle? That's actually what I'm looking for. So that's where the x goes. Is equal to opposite, which is 8, over the hypotenuse, which is 12. So now this is where it's a little bit tricky, and I may lose you if you have to replay. Go ahead and replay. But let's go ahead and put in 8 divided by 12. If it comes out even, we like that. It doesn't. Let's simplify it to 2/3. It comes out to 0.6 repeating. But we have to get rid of sine. The inverse of sine looks like this, sine -1. You look in your calculator, guys, if you find the sine button right above it in the shift button, you'll see sine -1. So you got to do it to all the terms. So this sine -1 and this sine are going to cancel each other, and x is going to drop down. So in your calculator, you're going to have to press second function, sine -1. You should see a sine -1. And then in parentheses, put in either 8 divided by 12 or 2 divided by 3 and hit enter. You should come out to about 41.8 millimeters. Whoops, it's not millimeters because we're looking for the angle. So it's about 41.8 degrees, which is angle X. Okay? Alright, now the last problem I was hoping to get done, which I'm going to run out of time, is this problem. So write that picture down for me before we run out and try this problem by yourself. This is 120 degrees. They have this. They want this. Okay, so they're giving us enough. Let's see if I can get you started before I run. Oh, I'm going to run out of time. But anyway, They gave you the opposite.